I spent a year planning what was supposed to be the perfect day. My wedding binder bulged with fabric swatches, vendor contracts, and pictures torn from bridal magazines that I'd been collecting since Tom proposed on that rainy evening at Magnolia Park. Every detail had been considered, from the delicate lace on my ivory dress to the exact shade of blue for the hydrangeas that would decorate St. Mary's Church in Boston. The morning of June 12th arrived with golden sunshine streaming through my childhood bedroom window. Mom helped me into my dress while my best friend Jess fussed with my hair, weaving tiny white flowers into my updo. My sister Katie snapped photos and wiped away tears, careful not to smudge her makeup. "You look like something out of a fairy tale, Ellie," Mom whispered, adjusting my veil one last time. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped back to look at me. "Your father would have been so proud." I felt a pang in my chest at the mention of Dad. 3 years had passed since the heart attack took him, but I'd left an empty seat in the front row with a single white rose. Some absences can never be filled. The drive to St. Mary's was a blur of nervous excitement. The church looked exactly as I had envisioned, transformed by cascading flowers and shimmering ribbons that caught the light filtering through the stained glass windows. Guests filled the pews, turning to smile as I peeked in from the vestibule. Even Tom's notoriously difficult mother, Margaret, seemed pleasantly composed in her lavender dress and oversized hat as she greeted arriving family members. Uncle Robert had stepped in to walk me down the aisle. He stood beside me now, patting my hand awkwardly, his cologne too strong in the small waiting area. "Ready, kiddo?" he asked, offering his arm. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon, my cue. I took a deep breath and nodded, feeling the butterflies in my stomach take flight. That's when I heard it, a commotion from inside the church. The music faltered. Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. I froze, 1 foot forward, as the heavy wooden doors burst open. Margaret Whitfield, Tom's mother, stormed into the vestibule, her face contorted in rage. The lavender outfit that had seemed so proper moments ago now made her look like an angry lilac bush as she charged toward me, brandishing an empty velvet jewelry box. "You!" she shrieked, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Where is it? Where did you hide it?" I stepped back, bumping into Uncle Robert. "Margaret, what are you talking about?" "My grandmother's diamond necklace. The one I was saving for my son's bride. A real bride. Not some gold-digging nobody from the wrong side of town." The accusation hit me like ice water. In the year I'd known Margaret, she'd never hidden her disapproval of me or my family's modest background. But this was different. This was public. This was cruel. "I haven't touched your necklace," I said, my voice small but steady. "I've never even seen it." The wedding coordinator appeared beside us, trying to usher Margaret away from the entrance where guests were now watching the scene unfold. "Mrs. Whitfield, please, let's discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss." Margaret's voice rose higher. "I brought it specially for today. It was in my hotel room this morning, and now it's gone." She was the only one who knew about it. Before I could defend myself again, Tom appeared in the doorway, his best man trailing uncertainly behind him. My heart lifted at the sight of him. Surely he would put an end to this madness. His tall frame and usually warm brown eyes had always made me feel safe. Today, in his tailored suit, he looked like everything I'd ever wanted. But those eyes weren't warm anymore. They swept over the scene, his mother clutching the empty jewelry box, me in my wedding dress, the confused onlookers, and hardened into something I didn't recognize. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous as he approached. "Tom, of course not. I would never. The necklace has been in our family for 4 generations. He cut me off. My mother was finally willing to pass it down. Why would you do this today of all days? The church had gone silent. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, witnessing my humiliation. My bridesmaids huddled near the door, uncertain whether to intervene. Jess took a half step forward, but I subtly shook my head. "I didn't take anything," I insisted, reaching for Tom's hand. "Please, let's just talk about this." His face darkened. "Don't lie to my face, Eleanor. Not now. Where is the necklace?" "I'm telling you the truth," I pleaded, tears threatening to spill over. "I've never seen your mother's necklace." I didn't take it. The words had barely left my mouth when it happened. Tom's hand shot up so fast I didn't have time to react. The slap echoed in the church's entrance hall, the force of it knocking me off balance. I stumbled backward, my veil catching on a nearby flower arrangement, tugging painfully at my scalp as I fell. A collective gasp rose from the witnesses. Uncle Robert lunged forward, but too late. My vision blurred, whether from tears or the impact, I couldn't tell. My cheek burned. My ears rang. Someone screamed. Maybe it was Jess. Maybe it was me. The last thing I remember seeing was Tom's face, the anger already melting into shock at what he'd done. Then darkness crept in from the edges of my vision, and the gleaming white and gold decorations, the faces of our guests, the man I thought I knew. It all disappeared into black. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled me from darkness. My eyelids felt heavy as I struggled to open them, revealing the sterile environment of Massachusetts General Hospital. Sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across mint-green walls. For one blissful moment, I couldn't remember why I was there. Then it all rushed back. The church. Margaret's accusation. Tom's hand connecting with my face. The humiliation. "Oh good, you're awake." A nurse with kind eyes and graying hair approached my bedside, adjusting something on an IV stand. Her name tag read, "Diane. How are you feeling, honey?" My cheek throbbed in response. I raised my hand to touch it, wincing at the tenderness. "You took quite a fall," Diane said, checking my vitals. "Dr. Patel says you have a mild concussion. We'd like to keep you for observation until this evening, just to be safe." I nodded, then immediately regretted the movement as pain shot through my temple. "Has anyone—" I swallowed, my throat dry. "Has anyone come to see me?" Diane handed me a plastic cup of water. "Your mother and sister were here all night. I finally convinced them to go get breakfast about 20 minutes ago. They should be back soon." She paused, her expression softening with sympathy. "No one from the groom's side, if that's what you're asking." Something twisted in my chest. Not surprise exactly, but confirmation of what I already knew. Tom wasn't coming. The Whitfields had closed ranks. "Your phone's been ringing non-stop," Diane added, nodding toward the side table where my purse sat. "I turned it to silent, but it's there if you want it." I didn't. Whatever waited on that phone, missed calls, text messages, social media notifications, would only pull me back into yesterday's nightmare. Instead, I stared out the window at the Boston skyline. So familiar, yet suddenly strange. How could the world look so normal when everything had changed? The door opened and Mom rushed in, Katie close behind. Mom's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She'd thrown on whatever clothes were closest, mismatched earrings and a sweater I recognized as one she usually reserved for gardening. "Ellie, sweetheart." She hurried to my side, taking my hand carefully as if I might break. "How are you feeling?" What a question. How was I feeling? Humiliated, betrayed, broken. But looking at Mom's worried face, I couldn't bring myself to say any of that. "I've been better," I managed, attempting a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Katie hovered at the foot of the bed, uncharacteristically quiet. My vibrant, outspoken little sister seemed at a loss for words. "I canceled the venue and called the vendors," she finally said. "And I packed up your apartment. Your things are at Mom's." The practical considerations hadn't even occurred to me. Our apartment, mine and Tom's, with its half-unpacked wedding gifts and the framed engagement photos on the wall. The honeymoon tickets to Greece sitting on the dresser. The future we'd planned, erased in a single moment. "Thank you," I whispered. "That bastard," Mom muttered, her Boston accent thickening as it always did when she was upset. "If your father were here." "But he's not," I said flatly. "And neither is Tom." The reality of that statement hit me harder than I expected. Tom, the man who had held me through Dad's funeral, who had spent Christmas mornings making his famous cinnamon pancakes in our tiny kitchen, who had promised forever, had vanished the moment I needed him most. Worse, he had been the one to hurt me. "Ellie," Katie started hesitantly. "People are talking. Someone recorded it on their phone, and it's being shared." My stomach dropped. "The whole thing?" Katie nodded miserably. It's everywhere. The Boston Globe even called Mom for a statement. Of course, the Whitfields were practically Boston royalty. Old money, influential connections, charity galas, and summer homes on the Cape. Their only son leaving his bride at the altar would have been gossip enough, but striking her in front of half of Boston's elite social circle? That was a scandal for the ages. I don't want to talk about it, I said, turning back to the window. Not to reporters, not to friends, not to anyone. Mom squeezed my hand. You don't have to, sweetheart, but at some point, you'll need to decide how you want to handle this. Handle this? As if it were a minor inconvenience rather than the implosion of my entire life. But I knew what she meant. There would be police reports to file or decline, statements to make or withhold, accounts to separate, belongings to divide. A relationship didn't just end, it unraveled, thread by painful thread. The next few hours passed in a haze of doctor's visits and discharge paperwork. By late afternoon, I was sitting in the passenger seat of Mom's station wagon as we crawled through Boston traffic toward her house in Jamaica Plain. The familiar triple-decker where I'd grown up looked exactly as it always had. The chipping blue paint, the narrow staircase, the porch where Dad used to sit with his coffee every Sunday morning. Katie carried my overnight bag upstairs, while Mom fussed with pillows on the living room couch. "You'll stay in your old room, of course," she said. "As long as you need." The thought of returning to my childhood bedroom, still decorated with faded concert posters and my high school swim team ribbons, felt like regression. At 32, I'd built a life. I had a career as an art therapist at Children's Hospital, friends, plans. Now I was back where I started, with nothing but a concussion and a broken heart to show for my efforts. Mom hovered anxiously. "Are you hungry? I could make that pasta you like. I just need to be alone for a bit," I said. "If that's okay." She nodded, though reluctance showed in every line of her face. "Of course. You know where to find me." Upstairs, my old room waited like a time capsule. Katie had placed my bag on the twin bed with its faded quilt. I sat down heavily, finally allowing myself to look at my phone. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, countless social media notifications, some from well-meaning friends, others from strangers who had seen the video and felt entitled to comment on the worst moment of my life. I turned the phone off without reading any of them. On my dresser sat a framed photo from my college graduation. Me flanked by my parents, all of us smiling. That woman in the cap and gown, eyes bright with possibility, seemed like a stranger now. I lay back on the bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars Dad had stuck to my ceiling when I was 10. They had lost their luminescence years ago, but I could still trace the constellations he'd created. In the quiet of my childhood room, I finally allowed tears to come. Not the dramatic sobs I'd expected, but silent streams that coursed down my temples and dampened my hair. I cried for the wedding that never happened, for the man I thought I knew, for the future I had planned so meticulously. But as the light outside faded to dusk, something else stirred within me. A flicker of anger, a spark of resolve. The Eleanor who had fallen in that church vestibule might have been broken, but I was still here, and I refused to let Tom Whitfield or his mother define who I would become. The morning after coming home from the hospital, I woke to the aroma of coffee and bacon drifting up from Mom's kitchen. For one disorienting moment, everything felt normal, like any Sunday morning from my past. Then I shifted in bed, and the pain in my head brought reality crashing back. I shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding the mirror. I didn't need to see the bruise I could feel on my cheekbone, the visual evidence of Tom's betrayal. I'd always been pale, porcelain skin, my grandmother used to call it, which meant every mark showed vividly. Makeup wouldn't hide this, not completely. Downstairs, Mom was flipping pancakes while Katie sat at the kitchen table, immersed in her laptop. They both looked up when I entered, their conversation halting abruptly. I recognized that silence, the hushed concern of people discussing someone who was broken. "You don't have to stop talking about me when I enter the room," I said, reaching for a mug from the cabinet. "I know I'm the hot topic." Katie closed her laptop. "We were just discussing legal options." I poured coffee, letting the steam warm my face. "I don't want to press charges." "Ellie," Mom began. I said no. My voice came out sharper than intended. I just want this to be over. I want to forget it ever happened. The look they exchanged told me they didn't agree, but neither pushed the issue. We ate breakfast in uncomfortable silence, the TV murmuring in the background. Some cooking show where everyone smiled too brightly and problems were solved in 30-minute segments. After breakfast, I retreated to the back porch with my coffee. The small garden Dad had tended so carefully had grown wild in the years since his death. Weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete, and the rose bushes stretched in untamed directions. I found it oddly comforting. Nature reclaiming its space, adapting to loss. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost declined the call, but some instinct made me answer. Hello? Ellie? It's me. Tom's voice. My hand tightened around the phone. Please don't hang up. I said nothing. Just listened to his breathing on the other end of the line. Ellie, God, I don't even know what to say. What I did. His voice cracked. There's no excuse. None. I just need to know you're okay. A laugh escaped me, harsh and humorless. Okay? You think I might be okay after what happened? No, of course not. I just meant, physically. Your head. When you fell. He trailed off, seeming to realize how inadequate his concern sounded now. Concussion, I said flatly. Doctor says I'll live. Ellie, please, I need to see you. To apologize properly, to try to... No. The word came out firm, surprising even me with its conviction. You don't get to see me. You don't get to apologize face to face and feel better about yourself. He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different. Strained. Almost frightened. Something's happening, Ellie. Something I can't explain. What are you talking about? The necklace. It was found. The words tumbled out quickly. In Mom's luggage. She'd wrapped it in a scarf and tucked it into a side pocket for safekeeping. She just forgot. She was so sure someone had taken it. That you had taken it. That she never thought to check her own things properly. I closed my eyes, gripping the porch railing. Vindication should have felt sweeter than this hollow ache in my chest. Tell your mother congratulations on finding her precious heirloom, I said. I hope it was worth it. Ellie, please. She's devastated. We both are. What happened was unforgivable. But if you could just... Unforgivable, I repeated. At least we agree on something. That's not all, Tom continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Strange things have been happening at the house. What things? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. It started last night. The lights kept flickering, objects moving. My bedroom window slammed shut so hard it cracked the glass. And Mom, he hesitated. She woke up screaming that someone was standing at the foot of her bed, a woman in a white dress. Despite the summer heat, a chill ran down my spine. I wasn't superstitious, but the image was unsettling. Maybe it's your guilty conscience, I suggested, trying to sound dismissive. There's more. His voice had taken on an edge of panic now. I had this dream. You were standing at the altar, but it wasn't at St. Mary's. It was somewhere dark. Your face, your cheek was bleeding where He couldn't finish the sentence. You looked at me and said I would regret what I'd done for the rest of my life. When I woke up, Ellie, I had a mark on my face, in the exact same spot. I clutched the phone tighter. That's not possible. I know how it sounds. I thought I was losing my mind, but Mom saw it too. It faded after a few hours, but it was there. A perfect handprint. The rational part of my brain knew this was ridiculous. Collective guilt manifesting as paranoia. The power of suggestion. Maybe even a fabricated story to earn my sympathy or forgiveness. And yet, I remembered a story my Irish grandmother used to tell about family curses and karmic justice. What goes around comes around, she would say in her lilting accent. But sometimes it comes around with interest. I'm not responsible for your guilty hallucinations, Tom, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I know that. He sounded desperate now. But can you at least tell me that I'm not, what, casting spells on you? The absurdity of the conversation was almost enough to make me laugh. Almost. I'm not a witch, Tom. Just a woman you betrayed in the worst possible way. A heavy silence fell between us. In the background on his end, I could hear what sounded like wind chimes, though the day was perfectly still. "The press is having a field day," he finally said, changing tactics. "My father's law firm is losing clients. Mom hasn't left her room since we got home yesterday. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you?" No, of course not," he sighed. A sound so familiar it made my chest ache despite everything. "I just want to know if there's any way forward from this, any path to making amends." I thought about the months we'd spent planning our life together, the apartment we'd chosen for its proximity to both our jobs, the Sunday brunches with friends, the children we'd talked about having someday. All of it, gone in an instant. "I don't know, Tom," I said truthfully. "Right now, I can't imagine ever wanting to see your face again." "I understand." His voice had gone quiet. "But Ellie, whatever's happening here, I'm scared. Mom's scared. It feels like what? Like punishment?" I gazed out at the overgrown garden, watching a monarch butterfly land on a weed that had once been one of Dad's prized daylilies. "Maybe it is." He was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. More sorry than I can ever express." I could have told him that sorry wasn't enough, that words couldn't erase actions, that some things once broken can never be repaired. But suddenly, I was tired, bone-weary in a way that had nothing to do with my physical injuries. "Goodbye, Tom," I said, and ended the call. I sat on the porch steps for a long time afterward, thinking about ghosts. Not the supernatural kind, but the kind we carry within us. The phantom pain of lost futures. The haunting of what might have been. The butterfly lifted from the flower, its orange wings vibrant against the blue sky, and flew away. I watched until it disappeared over the neighbor's fence, feeling something settle inside me. Not peace exactly. Not yet, but a certain stillness. A readiness to begin whatever came next. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Katie stepped out, a mug of fresh coffee in her hand. She offered it to me wordlessly, then sat beside me on the steps. "That was Tom on the phone?" she asked after a while. I nodded. "They found the necklace. It was in Margaret's luggage the whole time." Katie's hand tightened on her own mug. "That bitch." Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. Katie had never liked Margaret, had seen through her polished exterior to the judgmental core beneath long before I had. "He says strange things are happening at his house," I continued, surprising myself by sharing this. He thinks I might have something to do with it." Katie raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Voodoo dolls? A midnight ritual with black candles?" The image was so absurd I actually laughed. A rusty sound, but genuine. "Something like that. Apparently he woke up with a mark on his face where I gestured to my bruised cheek. Katie studied me for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Grandma Sullivan always said our family had a touch of the old magic in our blood. You don't actually believe that?" She shrugged. "I believe in justice, whatever form it takes." She bumped her shoulder gently against mine. "So what now, big sister?" I took a sip of coffee, considering. "Now," I said slowly, "I start over." 3 days after the wedding, I still hadn't ventured beyond Mom's backyard. My phone remained switched off, tucked away in a drawer. Katie had become my buffer against the outside world, fielding calls and turning away the occasional reporter who knocked on our door. "You'll have to face it eventually," Mom said gently as we shared coffee at the kitchen table. Morning light spilled through the window, highlighting the worn edges of the laminate countertops. "The longer you hide, the bigger it becomes." I traced the rim of my mug with my finger. "I'm not hiding. I'm recovering. From more than just a concussion." Mom had never been one to mince words. "Have you thought about what you'll do next? About work?" I hadn't. The children's ward at Boston Memorial, where I ran art therapy sessions, seemed like part of another life. The thought of facing colleagues who had undoubtedly seen the video, who would look at me with that awful mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, made my stomach clench. Before I could respond, Katie burst through the front door, her cheeks flushed from the June heat. "You won't believe what's happening," she announced, dropping her bag on the counter. "The Whitfield empire is crumbling." Mom shot her a warning look, but Katie was already pulling out her tablet, too excited to notice. Tom's father's law firm has lost 3 major clients since Saturday. People are calling it the slap heard round Boston. The hospital board is meeting today to discuss Tom's position. She looked up at me, eyes bright with vindictive satisfaction. Apparently, the head of pediatric surgery having a viral video of him assaulting his fiancée isn't great for the hospital's image. The news should have given me some satisfaction, but instead, I felt hollow. I never wanted to destroy his career. You didn't, Katie insisted. He did that all on his own. Mom placed a hand over mine. What does your heart tell you to do, Ellie? I didn't know. Part of me wanted to crawl into bed and stay there until the world forgot about Eleanor Sullivan and her disastrous wedding. Another part wanted justice. Not just for me, but for every woman who'd ever been on the receiving end of a man's anger, who'd been disbelieved and humiliated. I said slowly, I need to see what's out there. What people are saying. Katie hesitated. Are you sure? It's pretty intense. I nodded, reaching for her tablet. I need to know what I'm dealing with. The video was everywhere, on news sites, social media, even some national outlets. Shot from the side, it captured the moment with brutal clarity. Margaret's accusation, my denial, Tom's hand connecting with my face, my fall. The sound was the worst part. The collective gasp from the guests, someone's scream, the terrible silence that followed. Comment sections overflowed with opinions. Most expressed outrage on my behalf. Some, particularly on sites frequented by the kind of men who resented women on principle, suggested I must have done something to deserve it. A few wondered if the whole thing was staged for attention. What surprised me most were the stories emerging in response. Women sharing their own experiences of violence, of not being believed, of public humiliation. My private trauma had somehow become a catalyst for others to speak their truth. There's more, Katie said quietly, scrolling to a financial news site. Whitfield Investments has lost 15% of its stock value since Monday. Wealthy clients don't like scandals. I remembered Tom's father, Richard Whitfield, with his perfect suits and calculating eyes. He'd always treated me with polite disinterest, like a mildly risky investment. Now that investment had soured spectacularly. What about Margaret? I asked, unable to help myself. Katie's mouth twisted. She's gone into hiding at their place on Cape Cod, but not before giving an interview claiming you provoked the situation. Of course she did. I wasn't even surprised. In Margaret's world, appearances were everything. Her son couldn't possibly be at fault. There must be some explanation that preserved the Whitfield family honor. The doorbell rang, startling us. Mom went to answer it while Katie and I exchanged glances. Another reporter, probably. But Mom returned carrying a massive bouquet of white lilies. My wedding flowers. These just arrived for you, she said, setting them on the table. The cloying scent immediately filled the small kitchen. I plucked the card from among the blooms. Eleanor, it read in Tom's distinctive handwriting. There are no words that can undo what I've done. I will regret that moment for the rest of my life. Please call me Tom. Without a word, I carried the flowers to the trash can and dumped them in. The blooms looked obscene against coffee grounds and eggshells. Good girl, Mom said softly. My phone pinged from upstairs, a sound that made me freeze. I'd turned it back on that morning but hadn't checked messages. The 3 of us stared at the ceiling as if we could see through it to my bedroom. I'll get it, Katie offered, already heading for the stairs. She returned moments later, my phone in hand, her expression unreadable. It's Dr. Myers from the hospital. She's asking if you'll meet with her. Dr. Amy. Myers ran the pediatric psychiatric department where I worked. We weren't close, but I respected her. A formidable woman in her 60s who had built the department from nothing into one of the best in the country. Why? I asked, reluctant to engage with anything related to my former life. Katie shrugged. She just says she'd like to speak with you in person. No pressure, but she's available whenever you're ready. I considered declining. The hospital was only 3 blocks from the apartment Tom and I had shared. Too close to my old life. Too many memories. But curiosity won out. Tell her I'll meet her tomorrow, I said. At Simone's cafe, not the hospital. That night, I dreamed of the church again. But this time, instead of falling when Tom struck me, I stood my ground. The slap rippled through me like a wave, but I remained upright, my gaze steady on his shocked face. In the dream, I smiled, not with warmth, but with something colder. "Your turn," I said, and Tom crumpled to the ground while I walked away. I woke feeling strangely energized. For the first time since the incident, I took a proper shower, washing my hair and carefully applying concealer to the fading bruise on my cheek. I chose clothes deliberately, not the loose sweats I'd been living in, but a simple blue dress that had always made me feel confident. Simone's was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived. I spotted Dr. Myers at a corner table, her silver hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. She stood when she saw me, her expression warm but assessing. "Eleanor," she said, clasping my hand between both of hers. "Thank you for meeting me." We ordered herbal tea for her, black coffee for me, and made small talk until the server left. Then Dr. Myers leaned forward, her gray eyes intent. "I'll be direct," she said. "I've seen the video. Everyone has. It's appalling, and I want you to know that the hospital stands with you, not with Dr. Whitfield." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Thank you. He's been placed on administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. Regardless of the outcome, I want you to know that your position in the art therapy program remains secure, whenever you're ready to return." The relief was unexpected. I hadn't realized how much I'd been worrying about my job, about financial security on top of everything else. "The children miss you," she added. "Especially Lily. She asks about you every day." Lily, a 7-year-old leukemia patient with a talent for watercolors and a laugh that could illuminate an entire room. The thought of her waiting for me, wondering where I'd gone, stirred something in my chest. "I'm not sure I'm ready," I admitted. "Everyone will be talking." Looking at me differently, Dr. Myers stirred her tea thoughtfully. "Yes, they will. For a while. But you know, Eleanor, sometimes our worst moments become the foundation for our greatest strengths." She reached into her bag and withdrew a folder. "I have a proposition for you. The hospital has received a significant anonymous donation specifically for expanding the art therapy program. The donor wants to establish a new initiative focused on helping children process trauma through creative expression." She slid the folder across the table. "I'd like you to head it." I stared at her. "Me? After everything that's happened?" "Because of everything that's happened." Her gaze was steady. "You've experienced trauma in one of the most public ways imaginable. Who better to help these children find their voice?" As I walked home from the cafe, the folder tucked under my arm, I felt a shift within me, subtle but unmistakable. For days, I'd been a victim, the woman who was left at the altar, the woman who was struck. But Dr. Myers had seen something else, a survivor with something valuable to offer. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. I turned my face to the sky, letting the first drops fall on my skin. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't hide from what had happened. I wouldn't let it define me. Instead, I would use it, transform it into something that might help others find their way through darkness. The rain fell harder as I walked, but I didn't hurry. For the first time since that terrible day at St. Mary's, I felt the stirrings of something like hope. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the Boston Memorial Hospital, my heart hammering against my ribs. The imposing brick building had once felt like a second home. Now it loomed like a fortress I had to breach. "You've got this," I whispered to myself, clutching the leather portfolio Dr. Myers had given me, filled with plans for the new trauma-focused art therapy program. The automatic doors slid open. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, bracing for whispers and stares. They came, of course. Sidelong glances from nurses at the reception desk, a hushed conversation that stopped abruptly when I passed. My cheeks burned, but I kept my head high, focusing on the elevator at the end of the corridor. Just as I reached it, a familiar voice called my name. "Ellie! Oh my God, you're back!" Jen from occupational therapy hurried toward me, her face alight with genuine warmth. Before I could respond, she had enveloped me in a hug. "We've all been so worried," she said, stepping back to look at me. "Are you okay? That's a stupid question, isn't it? Of course you're not okay, but you're here, and that's, well, it's brave. Really brave." The simple kindness nearly undid me. I had prepared for pity, for morbid curiosity, even for judgment. I hadn't prepared for compassion. "I'm getting there," I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. "One day at a time. We're all on your side, you know," Jen said fiercely. "Every single one of us. That entitled jerk and his horrible mother can go to hell." A surprised laugh escaped me. "Thanks, Jen. That actually helps." The elevator arrived and we stepped in together. As the doors closed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was going to be hard, but I wasn't alone. Dr. Myers was waiting in her office, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of children's artwork that covered every available surface. "Eleanor," she greeted me with a firm handshake. "Right on time. Are you ready to get started?" For the next 2 hours, we hammered out details of the new program. The anonymous donation was substantial enough to fund a dedicated space, specialized supplies, and even an assistant. By the time we finished, I felt a familiar spark of excitement, the one that had drawn me to art therapy in the first place, the belief that creativity could help heal even the deepest wounds. "There's one more thing," Dr. Myers said as I gathered my notes. "The Boston Women's Foundation has reached out. They're hosting a fundraiser next month focused on domestic violence awareness. They've asked if you would consider being a speaker." My excitement dimmed. "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of public exposure." "It's entirely your choice," she assured me. "But your story has resonated with many women. Sometimes sharing our pain can help others find their strength." I promised to think about it, though my instinct was to decline. The thought of standing on a stage, recounting the worst day of my life to a room full of strangers, made my skin crawl. As I left the hospital, I decided to walk home rather than take the T. The June day was perfect. Clear blue sky, gentle breeze, the kind of weather that had made me choose June for my wedding in the first place. The irony wasn't lost on me. My route took me past the Charles River, where joggers and cyclists enjoyed the sunshine. On impulse, I found an empty bench and sat, watching the water sparkle. A young couple strolled by, hand in hand, lost in each other. A month ago, that sight might have twisted like a knife. Today I felt only a faint ache, progress of a sort. My phone buzzed with a text from Katie. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected," I replied. "Starting the new program next week." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Mom and I are celebrating your triumph with takeout from Chang's. Be home by 7 or risk losing your share of the dumplings." I smiled, tucking the phone away. My sister's unwavering support had been my lifeline these past weeks. She'd fielded calls, screened visitors, and maintained a steady stream of ice cream and bad movies on the nights when sleep wouldn't come. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. I closed my eyes, letting the sunshine warm my face. For a moment, I felt almost peaceful. "Ellie?" The voice shattered my calm. I knew it instantly, though I hadn't heard it in weeks. Opening my eyes, I found Margaret Whitfield standing before me, clutching an oversized designer purse like a shield. My first instinct was to flee. My second was to scream at her. I did neither, frozen by shock and a sudden surge of fury that stole my breath. Margaret looked terrible, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled, dark circles under her eyes visible even beneath expertly applied makeup. For once, her expression held no trace of its usual superiority. "May I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the space beside me on the bench. "No," I said flatly. She flinched but nodded, accepting the rejection. "I understand. I need to tell you something. I think you've said enough." Her perfectly manicured hands twisted together. "I was wrong. About everything. The necklace was in my luggage the whole time, just as I told Thomas. I was so certain someone had taken it, so focused on protecting a piece of jewelry, that Her voice broke. "I ruined my son's life. And yours." This was the apology I had fantasized about in my darker moments. Margaret Whitfield, humbled and remorseful. Yet now that it was happening, I felt nothing but a cold, hollow space where satisfaction should have been. "Did Tom send you?" I asked. She shook her head. "He doesn't know I'm here. We're barely speaking. Richard has taken him to their place in Maine to recover." She hesitated. "The hospital board meets tomorrow to decide his future. And you thought apologizing to me might save his career?" Her lips tightened. "Is that so hard to believe? That I might genuinely regret what happened?" Yes, I said simply, because you've never respected me. From the moment Tom brought me home, I was never good enough for your precious son or your perfect family. Margaret looked away, unable to meet my gaze. You're right. I judged you unfairly. I saw your background, your family, and decided you were beneath us. I was wrong about that too. A jogger passed, glancing curiously at us. An odd tableau on a sunny afternoon. The angry, devastated part of me wanted to tell Margaret exactly where she could put her belated apology. But something else stirred beneath the anger. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first step toward it. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally, but it doesn't change what happened. No, she agreed, her voice barely audible. Some things can't be undone. We sat in silence for a moment, the cheerful sounds of the park continuing around us. Children laughing, dogs barking, the distant splash of oars in the river. Thomas isn't well, Margaret said eventually. He can't sleep, barely eats. He keeps saying he sees you everywhere. In windows, reflections, dreams. I'm not haunting your son, Margaret. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. No, I don't suppose you are. Guilt is its own ghost, isn't it? She reached into her purse and withdrew a small velvet box. I came to return this to you. It belongs to you, regardless of what happened. My engagement ring. The 3-carat diamond Tom had chosen because, as he'd said, nothing less would do for my future wife. I'd loved the gesture at the time, seeing it as romantic rather than the statement of ownership it had actually been. Keep it, I said, or sell it. I don't want anything from the Whitfields. Margaret nodded, slipping the box back into her purse. I understand. She stood, straightening her wrinkled Chanel suit with a gesture that seemed more habit than vanity. For what it's worth, Eleanor, I am truly sorry. I watched her walk away, her once confident stride now hesitant. The woman who had tormented me, who had triggered the worst moment of my life, suddenly looked small and broken. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, as if I'd expected this confrontation to provide a closure it couldn't deliver. That evening, as promised, I made it home in time for Chinese food. Mom, Katie, and I ate directly from cartons at the kitchen table, sharing dumplings and stories from our days. I told them about my encounter with Margaret, watching their expressions shift from outrage to disbelief. And you didn't push her into the Charles? Katie asked, only half joking. Tempting, but no, I said, reaching for another spring roll. I think she's punishing herself more effectively than I ever could. Mom studied me over her reading glasses. You sound almost sorry for her. Not sorry exactly. I considered the feeling, trying to give it shape. More like, I don't want to be connected to her anymore, even by hate. Does that make sense? It does, Mom said softly. That's how healing starts. Later, alone in my room, I opened my laptop and found the email from the Boston Women's Foundation. The fundraiser was scheduled for July 15th, a month away. Just enough time to prepare. Before I could overthink it, I clicked reply and began typing. Thank you for your invitation. I would be honored to speak at your event. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital earlier than necessary. Instead of going straight to my office, I took the elevator to the children's ward. Lily was sitting up in bed, a sketch pad on her lap, her small face lighting up when she spotted me in the doorway. Miss Ellie, you came back. I crossed the room and sat beside her, taking in the colorful drawings that covered her walls, evidence of our sessions together before everything fell apart. I promised I would, didn't I? I said, smiling at her eager expression. And I brought something special. I pulled out a set of new watercolors. Professional grade, not the children's set she'd been using. These are for artists who are ready for a challenge. Think you're up for it? Her thin fingers traced the colors reverently. What should I paint first? I opened the set, revealing the spectrum of colors inside. Something brave, I suggested. Something that shows how strong you are. Lily considered this seriously, then nodded. I'll paint you, she decided. As she began to work, her small face focused in concentration, I felt something shift within me, a certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more stares, more whispers, more difficult conversations. But there would also be this, moments of connection, of creation, of turning pain into something beautiful. For the first time since that terrible day at St. Mary's, I didn't feel like the woman who had been left at the altar. I felt like Eleanor Sullivan, art therapist, survivor, and perhaps someday, thriver. 6 months passed in a blur of activity. Autumn arrived in Boston with its crisp air and fiery foliage, then yielded to the first snowfall of winter. The trauma-focused art therapy program had grown beyond my wildest expectations, with referrals coming not just from Boston Memorial but from hospitals across the city. We'd expanded to 3 sessions daily, with a waiting list that proved how desperately such services were needed. My speech at the Boston Women's Foundation fundraiser had been the turning point. Standing on that stage in July, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger with each word, I'd shared my story. Not just the public humiliation, but the slow, painful process of reclaiming myself afterward. The response had been overwhelming. Donations poured in, enough to fund a safe house for women escaping abusive relationships. Reporters who had once hounded me for gossip now sought me out for serious interviews about domestic violence and healing through art. In October, I moved out of Mom's house and into a small apartment in Cambridge, close enough to visit often, but far enough to establish my independence. The place was tiny, but mine, with large windows that flooded the rooms with light. I'd painted the walls myself, soft blues and greens that reminded me of the ocean, and filled the space with plants and books and art supplies. No photographs of Tom, no mementos of our relationship, just open space and possibility. Today, as I cleared away brushes and paints after my morning session, Dr. Myers appeared in the doorway of our newly renovated studio. "Do you have a moment?" she asked, her usual brisk demeanor softened by a smile. I nodded, washing crimson paint from my hands in the deep sink. "What's up?" "2 things, actually." She settled into one of the child-sized chairs, looking comically oversized. "First, the board has approved funding for a second full-time art therapist. The program's success has exceeded all expectations. Pride warmed me. That's wonderful news. They'd like you to help with the hiring process, since you've essentially created the curriculum from scratch." I dried my hands, turning to face her. "Of course, I'd be happy to." "Good." She hesitated, something unusual in her typically decisive manner. "The second matter is more personal. I've received a letter addressed to you, from Maine." My stomach tightened. Maine, where the Whitfields had their summer home, where Tom had retreated after the incident. I hadn't heard from or about him in months, not since his medical license had been suspended pending review. "You can throw it away," I said, turning back to organizing supplies. "I considered that," Dr. Myers admitted, "but I thought you should decide." She placed an envelope on the table between us. My name was written on the front in Tom's familiar handwriting. "Has he contacted you before this?" I shook my head. "Not since those first few weeks. His mother came to apologize once, but that was it." Dr. Myers stood, straightening her lab coat. "Whatever you decide, remember how far you've come, Eleanor. Don't let anyone pull you backward." After she left, I stared at the envelope, fighting the urge to rip it open. What could Tom possibly have to say that I needed to hear? Part of me, a small, stubborn part that refused to heal completely, still wanted an explanation. Wanted to understand how someone who claimed to love me could have hurt me so publicly and so brutally. Instead of opening the letter, I slipped it into my bag. This wasn't the place to confront ghosts. That evening, after a quick dinner at my favorite cafe near Harvard Square, I walked along the Charles River. The air held the sharp bite of December, but the sky was clear, stars winking into visibility as darkness fell. The letter seemed to burn through my bag, demanding attention. Finding an empty bench, I finally withdrew the envelope. It felt lighter than its emotional weight suggested. For a moment, I considered tossing it unopened into the river, watching it drift away like a tiny paper boat carrying unwanted memories. Instead, I tore it open. "Eleanor," it began simply. "I've written this letter 100 times in my head, and none of the versions seem adequate. What can I possibly say to make amends for what I did? There are no words, no actions that can erase that moment or the pain I caused you. I've spent 6 months in therapy, trying to understand why I reacted with violence when I had never raised a hand to anyone before. I could blame it on the pressure of the day, on my mother's influence, on temporary insanity. But the truth is simpler and harder to face. I had anger inside me that I never acknowledged, never addressed. And in that moment, it exploded. The consequences have been severe, as they should be. My medical license remains suspended. The hospital offered me a chance to